Tension in the hall reached its peak. Viola Vikland was found guilty, and the judges delivered the final verdict on the fate of that incredible sorceress who was expelled from the kingdom. After her magic was sealed, Viola was sentenced to exile. The hammer fell, and with it vanished the honor and power of the once influential deputy commander of the magical corps. Viola's hands and feet were bound with chains, and the soldiers cruelly pushed her out of the palace, with one of them urging to make it in time for the appointed execution of the exile. When she was called a witch, Viola's gaze became icy. She clenched the chain, suppressing the burning anger over the betrayal of those she once protected with all her heart. Once, Viola Vikland was a young lady from the respected Dougal family, and the deputy commander of the magical corps. She was the pride of the kingdom, endowed with innate talent. One day, Roy praised Viola for dedicating herself fully to training. He announced that from then on she would serve the kingdom as a court sorceress. Duke Reed Vikland advised his daughter not to be arrogant because of her power. Viola smiled and vowed to give her body and soul for the prosperity of the country. At 15, Viola entered the Royal Academy and graduated top of her class. She was made a court mage, a dream of every resident. Roy sincerely praised her and was confident that Viola would soon become the chief mage. She blossomed with joy and promised to try even harder to meet these expectations. Viola worked diligently every day with her loyal subordinates. She ruled the battlefield, used magic to protect the kingdom, and won numerous glorious victories. When she appeared on the streets, people always adored her. However, during a mission in a deep forest, shadow monsters suddenly appeared and surrounded the squad. Roy watched the dangerous situation tensely, and Viola ordered everyone to cover their ears and prepared to cast an extremely powerful spell to destroy the attacking monsters. A devastating explosion sounded, instantly sweeping away all enemies, and when the battle ended, Viola rushed to check Roy's condition. Roy admitted that he had heard many rumors about the talent Vikland Aries, but did not expect her to be so skillful. Viola modestly replied that she still had a lot to learn. Roy proposed to Viola to become his personal bodyguard, and it deeply moved her. She thought those were happy days, but at the trial a tragedy suddenly struck. Turning back to the present, the soldier loudly accused Viola of ordering the killing of His Majesty Roy, and this baseless accusation instantly plunged the entire courtroom into gloomy sorrow. Viola immediately exclaimed that it was a fake and demanded explanations from Roy, but the soldiers instantly shouted at her, forcing her to fall silent. Roy coldly raised his hand and cast a silence spell on Viola. She could not utter a single word. The truth was buried at the moment when the one she trusted the most made his move. They found a magical item as evidence against Viola. She froze in shock. Roy expressed his disappointment to the one who was his deputy. Roy announced that he would cast a forbidden spell on Viola, reverse transformation, to take away her power. It was a cruel punishment reserved only for the most dangerous criminals. He explained that one previous offender who was subjected to this forbidden spell was reverted back to an embryonic state and he died. Viola shuddered, standing opposite. Here is this painful perspective. Although she survived, Viola was turned into a 6-year-old child with a fragile body. Roy mockingly remarked that she was lucky not to have died. Roy ordered to seal the magical seals on Viola's hands and feet. Before carrying out the sentence, wanted to make sure she would never be able to perform magic again. Exile to the wild wasteland was practically a death sentence, second only to execution, and how could a child like Viola survive among fierce beasts? Maybe Viola will survive. Wizards laboriously activated the magic circle to send her away, while Viola, standing amidst the cold crowd, could only stare frozen at the one who betrayed her. Viola looked at Roy with pain and distrust. She could not believe that the person she respected and devoted herself to could become so cruel. In her memory, Roy once tenderly called her Vivi. Back then, she diligently studied new techniques, hoping to help the kingdom's development. Time quietly passed in the library Roy often visited and gently reminded Viola to rest. While she immersed herself in her research, he pretended to care about her health. Roy handed Viola a heavy bag, which surprised her, but the small signs of care completely blinded her to his insidious plans. Roy smiled gently and told Viola to rest until further instructions. She believed that false smile, unaware of the impending disaster. Viola was grateful to have such a gentle leader as Roy. She secretly considered him the best, but it was all just a facade. Suddenly, Roy changed sharply. He called her research nonsense. He coldly ordered her to remove those useless papers. Returning to the present moment, Viola bowed her head in silent agreement as the teleportation circle flared. Roy said in a cold voice that she would be sent somewhere previously unmentioned. The magical power grew, and the order to execute the banishment was given. Viola repeated to herself that there must be some reason why Roy had changed so terribly. Roy froze, watching Viola disappear in the glow of the magic circle. Before leaving, she whispered that she would survive and uncover the truth. The truth that was hidden behind the betrayal. Although Viola's body was childlike, her eyes shone with unwavering determination. She would not allow herself to break before the harsh trials ahead. Viola was thrown into an abyss amid rows of snow-white mountains, and bracelets sparkled on her wrists, a painful reminder that her magic had been taken away. Her small body freely fell through the boundless sky. Below lay treacherous peaks overlapping each other, feared even by experienced mages. Viola screamed in despair when she realized that her magic was completely sealed. She could not use the usual flight spells. The ground was rushing up at a terrifying speed, and if she did not quickly find a way to soften the impact, the fragile body of the 6-year-old child would surely be crushed. A fierce desire to survive flared up in the brilliant sorceress. She gritted her teeth and swore she would not die here in vain. Viola could barely concentrate. Her head was pounding wildly. She needed to find another way to replace her usual magic to survive the fall. Research on artifact magic came to her mind, how objects replace their own mana. It was her only lifeline. To cast a spell now, the research once mocked by relatives and colleagues suddenly became hope. Viola decided to use that forgotten knowledge to face her fate. Viola poured out her last strength, invoking the wind wall technique. Small magical circles began to appear around her tiny hands, slowing the fall. Suddenly, a powerful gust burst forth, creating an air cushion between Viola and the hard ground, and leaves flew in all directions under the colossal pressure of the wind magic she summoned. Viola struggled against the airflow but suddenly realized there was no time for another flight spell, so she had to maximize the wind wall to reduce injuries. Her tiny hands clenched with determination as she directed energy into the artifact. She believed that with her knowledge she could overcome this. The slowing technique worked at the last moment, slowed the fall, and saved Viola's life. She bit her lip in pain and struggled to maintain balance amid the roaring whirlwinds. Viola hit the ground with such a powerful blow that the earth trembled, but fortunately she remained unharmed. Lying there gasping, she was still stunned after escaping mortal danger. Viola was stunned. The silent spell had vanished, and looking around at the dense, gloomy forest, she could not understand where she was. Next to Viola, who lay motionless on the ground, a mysterious figure appeared. She vowed to survive to reveal the truth about this murder. The cold face of an unfamiliar young man looked down at Viola. His piercing eyes seemed to carefully study her past. The servant Era smiled gently and introduced herself to Viola, carefully tended to her, and assured her that she was now completely safe. Noah Rayfeld appeared with a formidable presence and asked Era about the situation, and Viola was confused and did not know how to answer questions about her origin. Noah looked at Viola suspiciously, although Era assured him she posed no threat. Era saw how wary this reserved young man was. Noah feared the child was a cunning enemy trap, so he ordered Era not to lower her guard and to watch Viola closely. Era smiled lightly and tried to calm Viola, saying her master was actually very kind, but Viola still felt the pressure of the looming figure. Noah's gaze was full of calculations because he associated the child with the witch they had saved, and the strange resemblance did not allow him to dismiss his doubts. He stared at the ring on her hand and began to suspect who she really was, wondering if it was just a coincidence. This was the domain of Duke Feld on the kingdom's border. Era advised Viola to rest a little longer, because her body was still pale and weak. Viola murmured about the kingdom of Altian, trying to piece together recent events, and realized with horror. She had been brought to a completely unfamiliar land. This world was divided among 3 mighty powers that were eternally at war. The magical kingdom of Nemesis, where Viola once lived, was cut off on the southern continent. Ira gently stroked Viola's head and respectfully spoke the name Feld. Viola began to rummage through her memory in search of mentions of this famous duke in old records. Viola recalled what she had read about Duke Noah from the time when he was a court mage. Then, he became famous for pulling the strings of political affairs across the entire continent. Noah became a lord at 19 when his parents died under mysterious circumstances. He broke through fierce resistance and strengthened the power of the Feld family. He was nicknamed the Ice Duke. Noah always kept an emotionless expression that frightened others, and suddenly Era remembered and while looking after Viola, asked her what her name was. Viola clearly realized, revealing that she was a Nemesis sorceress now would be extremely dangerous. She knew she was in the body of a child from a hostile kingdom. If it turned out that she was from Nemes, Viola would definitely face the death penalty. She feared that the knowledge she held could be used as political weaponry. Viola decided to call herself YY to hide her true self from Maid Era. Although she was ashamed to lie, she had no other choice. Era said that Noah saved her from traitors among the slaves who mistook her for a slave. The maid advised Vai to rest well before nightfall. The next morning, Ira opened the window, let in the sunlight, and as if blessing, greeted Vai, asking how she felt after a long sleep. The deep sleep recharged Vai, her body finally allowed light movements, but a big problem arose that terribly embarrassed her. Seeing herself in just one too large adult shirt, Vai's face flushed a crimson blush. Although she looked like a child, the soul of a great mage deeply felt shame. Ara, shining with joy, invited Vai to go with her to meet her master to thank him personally. Although she was embarrassed by her appearance, the child still waddled forward amusingly, curiously looking at the one who helped her. Ira led Vai to meet her master. On the way, Soldier Bart greeted them, smiled with relief seeing the girl awake, and asked Ira to introduce him to the child later. Wai was overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. No one had treated her gently for so long. Era smiled and explained that everyone was very worried about her. Duke Noah Rayfeld began the interrogation with an icy gaze, asking the girl about her name and age. Wai trembled and said that her name was Wai. She was 6 years old, and she was confused when asked why she had fainted there. Vivi held her breath, preparing for the question she knew would soon be asked, and deliberately put on a pitiful, frightened expression to start the lie she had carefully prepared. The girl invented a story as if she had just escaped from the hands of slave traders. When Noah asked if there were other children, she said she was alone. About her homeland, she said it was a small, nameless village in the forest. Dukefeld remained skeptical and did not take his eyes off Vai. She felt oppressive pressure and understood. Under no circumstances could she reveal that she was a high-ranking mage from Nemes. Ara intervened, offering to take the girl to eat because she had just woken up. But Noah coldly refused. It was not allowed to keep a suspicious person of unknown origin nearby. Wei silently understood Noah's caution. He was a lord. Just as she was about to think of how to correct the impression, a scream sounded, and the entire garrison rose to alarm. Noah's face darkened as he looked outside. Their camp was surrounded by numerous grotesque black shadows, and the soldiers and servants began to panic. Noah felt the presence of the enemy and was puzzled, not understanding why they had appeared here. Vai stared at the black creatures, her eyes wide with amazement and fear. Noah ordered Iri to lead the non-combatants away and flee, while the soldiers held back the enemy. He handed Iri a dagger for self-defense. She trembled. Noah shouted for the soldiers not to gather in groups, but to dodge instead. Ordinary swords and spears were powerless against the monsters. And suddenly, a soldier's cry of pain sounded as he was struck. Vivi instantly recognized the creatures. In Nemes, they were called shadow horrors, extremely cruel and wild magical beasts that often appeared as phantoms. For such a powerful mage as she was, these beasts were just a trifle during the suppression of uprisings on the outskirts of the city. She had exterminated many of them. But her magic was sealed. She found herself in a child's body, and now fighting or even fleeing was extremely dangerous. Vivi hurriedly asked Era if there was anyone here who could use magic, and the servant sadly replied that such people were extremely rare. There were only a few in the entire domain. Ara assured Vai that the Duke has a magical blade, so those monsters are not necessarily invincible, and also insisted that they had prepared all the necessary magical items. Chaos erupted when the shadow monsters began their frenzied attack. Era shouted at Vivi to run before the space was filled with the painful screams of the victims. Pain and despair were carved on Era's face. She realized that if this continued, the Duke and all present would be in terrible danger and would have no chance to escape. Suddenly, Era stopped and looked at Vai. The girl was completely confused by the sudden change in the servant's attitude and gaze. Era was breathless. She apologized and, trembling, asked Vai to flee first. She believed that the master would find her later and firmly said that protecting her lord was her mission, even if she had to disobey orders. The other servants also decided to stay, declaring that the Duke had saved their lives and they were ready to sacrifice themselves, while Vive felt bitterly that at that moment she could not use magic. Suddenly she realized that there was still a way to destroy them: artifact magic. But if she used this technique, her secret might be revealed. She was not an ordinary child. Not ready to watch everyone die, Vai decided to take the risk. She abruptly stopped and stood in front of the monsters, leaving Era stunned and confused. She instantly picked up a stone from the ground and told Era to hand her a dagger. Having the tools in her hands, Vai prepared to put on a stunning magical show. Viola tightly gripped the dagger and the stone, her eyes burning with determination. She asked Era to retreat quickly to prepare to cast her, or some special defense technique. Viola enthusiastically began to explain the nature of artifact magic, an ancient technique once called alchemy. Mana was taken not from oneself, but from stones and runic words. Unlike ordinary magic, artifact magic drew power from natural minerals, awakening them with keywords, but due to limitations and lower efficiency, it was often dismissed as useless. Because of the difficulty in deciphering ancient words and the preference for ordinary magic, artifact magic had long fallen into oblivion among mages, but Viola secretly studied it in the finest details for many years. Viola focused all her attention on the object in her hand to activate the technique, and suddenly, a powerful wind shield gale barrier appeared before everyone, covering her and Era, stunning all. Noah Refeld was shocked when he witnessed some strange power manifesting from the girl's hand. Amid the chaos, Viola shouted for everyone to immediately gather behind her. Noah and the soldiers were stunned, not believing that a child could create such a powerful barrier. Viola remained incredibly focused, maintaining the technique while Era was in shock. Viola, confidently smiling, turned to Noah and assured him that she would protect him. The cold Duke froze speechless at the determined statement of the tiny girl. The girl shouted for everyone to cover their ears. A powerful strike was approaching. Viola prepared to unleash a decisive blow with all her strength to crush the monsters. The attack flame lance descent worked a colossal heat and blinding light exploded, and the entire area was engulfed in fierce, blazing energy. Burning spears of fire struck the shadow army with destructive force. A terrible explosion shook the ground and completely destroyed the enemy presence. In a moment, the swarm of dark creatures that inspired terror vanished without a trace. Dukefeld stood frozen in place, stunned by the destructive power that had just erupted. The forest fell silent as the battle suddenly ceased, and Ira with the soldiers looked at Viola with fear and admiration. No one dared utter a word. The remains of the monsters completely disappeared, leaving only scattered earth and fallen trees. Viola's attack erased the enemy in an instant and saved the entire group. Noah approached, his face full of suspicion. He could not understand who or what stood before him, and where that mana came from. Enchanted, she felt her strength fading. Having invested more mana in the attack than her body could endure, Viola collapsed weakly to the ground. Era shouted her name in panic and rushed to catch the tiny figure. Noah stood silently, watching the girl fade in Hera's arms, and countless questions arose in his mind. The entire camp was in shock after these incredible events. Viola fell, completely exhausted, and thus ended the dramatic first battle. This clash was doomed to shake the future of the entire domain. On the turning page, a message about the next chapter appeared. In her subconscious, Viola reached out with a trembling hand to Roy's shadowed back and bitterly shouted, "Your Majesty." Tears welled up in Viola's eyes as she remembered Roy and his past cruelty. Stunned and in unbearable pain, she shouted his name, finally closing that dreadful page. Viola woke up in the carriage and noticed that Noah and Era were intently watching her, and Era blossomed with joy finally. The girl had regained consciousness after the tense battle with the shadow beasts. Viola rose, straining to recall what had happened in the forest. She realized she was sitting in the Duke's carriage, heading to Noah's estate. She remembered how magic saved everyone. Noah said that more than half the soldiers were wounded, and the losses from the attack were considerable. Noah confirmed that although many were wounded, no one had died. Hearing this, Viola bowed her head and exhaled with relief. Her efforts to save them had worked. Duke Noah looked at Viola and acknowledged that all who survived owed their lives to her actions. The little girl met his gaze with large, determined eyes. The escort finally arrived at the luxurious estate of Duke Feld. Noah stepped out of the carriage and decisively ordered Viola to prepare. Then, she would have to tell the whole truth about who she really was. With a stern expression, Noah pressured her, demanding that Viola tell everything without hiding anything, and the Duke's pressure made the atmosphere unbearably tense. After her story, Noah and Era were shocked to the core, but Noah still cautiously believed the girl. He noticed no signs of lying. Noah stood up and admitted that Viola's story was hard to believe, but the fact that she saved an entire troop was true. He promised to consider the deal she proposed. As a lord, Noah sincerely thanked her. He knew that his soldiers would never allow him to abandon the one who saved them all. The Duke bowed low and officially addressed her as Viola Wickland, not the usual Vivi. It was a sign that she was recognized not as a child, but as an equal partner. Viola smiled gently in response to Noah's respect. She felt that the first step of her plan to restore justice and take revenge on the kingdom of Nemes had gone smoothly. Noah told Viola to rest and ordered Ero to take her to her room. Her new room turned out to be spacious, luxurious, and much better equipped than in her previous life. Viola finally enjoyed the softness of the luxurious bed after a long time, buried her face in the pillow, and felt the comfort she had long missed. Lying alone in the dark, Viola turned over in her mind the accusation of murder that King Roy had unjustly brought against her. Her fists clenched, she resolutely decided to get to the truth hidden behind this conspiracy. Moonlight illuminated the felled estate, and Viola decided to take back everything she had lost. She swore not to leave the traitors unpunished. The next morning, Viola wandered the wide corridors of the estate, getting acquainted with it, when suddenly she heard Enro talking to someone in the kitchen. Viola watched as Ira fussed in the kitchen with Bart, a young soldier, and Bart smiled and eagerly helped her with the morning preparations. In the office after the battle, Noah bitterly spoke about the damaged weapons and insisted that to defend themselves they needed to arm with more magical artifacts. Viola silently stood in the doorway and listened to the conversations about the financial and military difficulties of the estate, beginning to consider how to use her magical knowledge to help. Because of a minor mishap, a pile of weapons collapsed, and Bart rushed to clean up, while Viola stood nearby watching the young soldier awkwardly trying to organize everything. Bart noticed Viola and smiled at her, sincerely thanking her for saving his life yesterday. The young soldier was very friendly and not at all wary. When Bart asked, Viola introduced herself as Vi Vi. They talked a little, and Viola felt the warmth and sincerity of these soldiers. He named himself Bart and thanked her again for saving the group, because it hurt him that such a small girl had to suffer so much. Bart knelt to thank on behalf of the team and the Lord. Viola quietly looked at her new friend, then became curious and began asking about the true face of the Duke. Viola asked Bart about the real Noah. Knocked down, Bart insisted that despite rumors among his subordinates, the Duke was an exceptionally kind lord. Bart said that Duke Noah had endured many shocks because of his uncle, and because of this, extremely complicated relationships had developed in the family. Seeing Bart's sadness, Viola understood he was afraid he would be expelled if he lost the ability to fight. Silently, she assessed the true state of the Duke's troops. Bart sat next to Viola. Still stunned, he could not get out of his head the magic with which the girl had saved the troops from fierce shadow monsters yesterday. Viola explained that the power she possessed was completely different from ordinary magic. She insisted that neither origin nor age mattered for the ability to control magic if the will was strong enough. Viola enthusiastically explained what the magic of artifacts is, and Bart listened silently. He could not believe that a child had such deep and broad knowledge. Seeing Bart's interest, Viola offered to teach him personally. Bart was very surprised but could not hide his joy at this unexpected offer. Viola firmly said that at the beginning Bart must master the entire history of the formation of artifact magic. She showed how serious a true teacher can be about her student. The conversation was suddenly interrupted by someone's appearance. Viola shuddered and turned around, and Bart instantly stood up to observe military protocol. The scene moved to the office, where Duke Noah sat exhausted before towering piles of documents, resting his chin on his hand and thoughtfully considering the growing difficulties. Noah sternly reprimanded Viola for thoughtlessly showing her power to a stranger and warned her, "Do not trust anyone so easily." When Noah expressed doubt, Viola mentally decided this was her chance. She knew that for revenge she needed a powerful and sharp ally like him. Viola smiled slyly. She decided to use herself as bait to lure the enemy out, and every step she took was planned down to the smallest detail. Looking at her current appearance, Viola felt anxiety. Her magic was sealed, and her body was childlike, so she lacked strength for direct combat. She turned her gaze to Duke Noah, known and powerful, who commanded a strong army. He turned out to be the perfect figure for the revenge plan she was going to implement. Viola bluntly named the problems plaguing this sphere, from lack of equipment to budget difficulties, and Noah was stunned by her insight. In the silence, Viola boldly proposed cooperation to Noah, confident that her knowledge would help him overcome the current military difficulties. "Why not use me?" exclaimed Viola, offering Noah both financial and military support. She would make equipment and train elite fighters. In front of everyone, Viola openly confessed. She is the former deputy commander of Niim's S Arcane Corps and promised to devote all her strength and skills to fully assist Duke Exiled. Noah asked about her true motives. Viola smiled and said she wanted to repay the rescue and help him strengthen his holdings. In her soul, Viola was worried that she might look too conspicuous and closely watched Noah. He silently remained inscrutable to the proposal. Viola kept a calm smile despite the pressure of Noah's watchful gaze. She knew that the cold Duke was carefully weighing her value. Noah suddenly recalled a similar event from the past and felt that Viola could be the key, so he decided to keep her close to verify everything. Looking at his hands, Noah swore not to be weak anymore. He decided to restore justice at any cost and prepared for ruthless retribution. After a duel of minds, they finally found common ground, and Noah and Viola exchanged glances, silently agreeing to stand side by side, each pursuing their own goal. Duke Noah and Viola Wickland officially concluded a cooperation agreement in the office, and both were already set on the great plans that awaited ahead. Ira entered the room with a tray of tea. Her face shining with joy, she felt great relief seeing that the cold lord accepted Viola. And noticing that the tension had eased, she smiled and hoped that from now on everything would improve. She always paid special attention to the fact that Viola was the only one who could pay special attention to the little girl. Left alone, Noah thoughtfully looked at the portrait of his parents on the table and quietly whispered to himself that Viola was the only thread that would lead to the truth. When Noah thought about those who killed his family, his eyes flared with the fire of hatred, and he swore to do everything, even make a pact with demons to take revenge. The soldier knelt down and reported what was happening, while the air there was filled with tension and gloom under the rule of this ruler. The head of the Neem's kingdom, outwardly elegant but secretly deceitful, looked dissatisfied and sharply reprimanded his subordinate for being late with the report. With a cold smile, he showed cruelty and contempt for the lives of his subordinates, immediately ordering the soldier to retreat at once. The soldier trembled as he left the room under a threatening gaze, and he muttered that those who speak untimely need proper punishment. The next morning, Viola woke up fresh and lively after a good sleep and told herself, "It is time to start saving the estate." As Viola was walking down the corridor, suddenly loud noises and desperate cries sounded from afar, and she was immediately seized by unease. Viola came upon Era, and other maids in panic and sorrowthy were standing in front of the arsenal with frightened faces covered in tears. Upon entering, Viola opened her eyes wide in horror. A scene that gripped the heart appeared before her. In a place she considered safe, a tragedy had occurred. Bart, a good soldier who had befriended Viola, lay motionless on the floor, surrounded by a large pool of blood. The place was tragic and terrible. Noah and his men rushed to the place in the arsenal. The sudden death of Bart stunned everyone and enveloped those present in sadness. The trembling soldier said he found Bart's body during an equipment check and confirmed that he was completely breathless. Noah ordered Era to take the maids aside to keep them calm. Viola stood frozen, her small hand clenched with anger and sorrow. Viola remembered Bart's smile, and the sincere care he showed her was one of the few soldiers who treated her warmly and gently. Noah himself examined Bart's wound and was convinced it was a sword cut. However, there were no signs of a struggle at the scene. Noah suspected that the killer was someone inside the mansion because there were no signs of a break-in. Viola silently examined the wound with the sharp sight of a mage. Suddenly, Viola felt a familiar energy in the air. She recognized it as the residual mana of the one who struck. Viola knelt by the body and pointed to the small fragments lying on the floor. Noah approached with interest and asked what she had found. Viola picked up a tiny shard of stone, and with burning eyes explained that it was no ordinary stone. She insisted it was the key evidence that would point to the killer. It was a fragment of a catalyst stone, an item without which magic is impossible, and this clearly indicated the killer resorted to spiritual power, not to the sword. Viola insisted that even from this pile of remains one could read the unique mana imprint of each. She was confident soon she would expose the traitor. Looking at Bart's body, Duke Noah inquired whether he was killed by magic, and Viola confirmed. It was a primitive spell cast by someone who knew little about magic. Viola explained that a true mage would never leave such obvious traces, and the clumsy method of murder seemed to have set up the perpetrator himself. Desperately, the traitorous soldier ran through the dark forest, repeating to himself that he must escape as soon as possible before the Dukefeld troops noticed and caught him. Soon Noah and Viola caught up with the killer in the forest, and Viola coldly ordered him to stop, her gaze burning with rage. Viola, pointing directly at the trembling man, loudly declared that the mana imprint on him perfectly matched the one at the crime scene, and asserted he was the one who killed Soldier Bart. The traitor pretended to be shocked and tried to deny, addressing Noah with a question why the mighty Duke should believe a child's talk, loudly insisting that a child's words could not be evidence, and tried to cover his cruel deeds with ordinary logic. Viola, with a contemptuous smile, declared that all evidence was already exposed, and the soldier, confused, did not understand what she was hinting at with this confident statement. Viola closed her eyes to concentrate and used a special spell to dispel the villain's disguise. The soldier began to feel the magical pressure tightening around him. Under Viola's spell, the bloodstains on the soldier's overcoat, previously hidden, began to clearly appear. He did not have time to react to this. Viola said coldly that those cheap camouflage tricks against her were useless. The soldier recoiled in horror when he realized his identity had been exposed. Noah approached closer and demanded from the traitor to say who taught him that magic. He knew this type of spell was rare, and learning by oneself is not easy. In the eyes of the killer, malice and madness shone. Realizing there was no escape, he clenched his fists and prepared for the final, desperate act. Viola warned fiercely that if he did not confess, she would resort to harsher measures. She swore not to let Bart's killer escape again. When everything turned against him, the traitor drew a hidden dagger and lunged at Viola, believed there was no other way, so he would have to fight to the death. He quietly whispered that he had received an order to eliminate the unnecessary one, and Viola was stunned by the very word order. It indicated a broader conspiracy behind this incident. The soldier, throwing fragments of the magic stone at Viola, menacingly threatened to cut off her head as proof of his deed. Viola instantly realized the threat these objects posed. Viola's eyes widened in horror as she saw the reckless soldier pouring mana into the exhausted Stonesthai's insane act would inevitably cause a powerful explosion. In the middle of the forest, a blinding flash and a fierce explosion burst forth a space filled with smoke and chaos from the enemy's suicidal attack. Viola anxiously realized that in the child's body she did not have the strength to stop the explosion, and she feared that the attack threatened both her and Noah. At the decisive moment, Noah suddenly stepped forward to cover Viola, and with a decisive, powerful movement drew his sword before. As befits a true warrior, with a sharp, blade-like movement, Noah shattered the magical stones and extinguished the explosion. The traitor froze in shock, seeing that physical strength had overcome magic. Noah turned to Viola, anxiously asked if she was uninjured, and sincerely admitted that he was inexperienced in fighting mages and truly needed her support. Noah extended his hand to Viola and solemnly invited her to join his squad. He wanted them to unite and together face the hardships ahead. Viola looked at Noah and smiled confidently, told him not to ask obvious questions, and assured him that, of course, she would stand by him as a true ally. Noah gripped his sword, ready for battle. Viola smiled confidently and again offered her help, insisting that now was the time to prove she was his powerful ally. The traitor mocked Noah and Viola, claiming they were no match for him. Viola coldly cut him off, belittling his technique as that of a novice. She directly called his skill inferior, which simultaneously surprised and angered him. Suddenly, a powerful surge of magical energy swirled around Viola. The traitor was frightened by this terrifying change and shouted in shock, feeling immense power. The energy enveloped the entire area. In the dazzling magical glow, Viola exclaimed that she would show the soldier her true power. Although she was in a child's body, she was a renowned deputy commander of the Arcane Corps, ready to end the fight and expose the traitor's conspiracy. The assassin fiercely lunged at Viola, but the little girl showed no fear and instantly responded with a powerful wind spell. The killer froze in surprise at Viola's power. Meanwhile, she calmly controlled the arcane flames, demonstrating the skill of a former deputy commander. Viola calculated every step. She had very few catalyst stones, and she knew well. Power could not be wasted because only a few uses of the strongest magic remained. A gigantic whirlpool of magic enveloped everything around. Viola resolutely sought to finish the fight as quickly as possible so that the situation would not worsen and get out of control. The fight was extremely intense. Blows flew lightning fast. Viola's eyes were cold and Focus Edge watched every movement, searching for the moment to end the fight. The killer was hit. He grabbed his wounded stomach and writhed in pain, while Viola stood aside and coldly ordered him to surrender or expect the worst. Viola suddenly felt that something was wrong under her feet. She frowned and looked down at the dry leaves, felt some strange energy quietly awakening there. At the sight of the catalyst stone, a dazzling explosion suddenly occurred. Everything around shook violently, dust and fragments rose into the air and scattered throughout the entire forest. Noah swiftly grabbed Viola, becoming a shield for her from the explosion, while she stared stunned at the killer trying to escape through the dense. Thick clouds of dust filled the air. Viola panicked when she realized that after the explosion the extremely important catalyst stone had disappeared. Without it, her fragile body would be unable to perform high-level magic. Looking at her empty palms, she felt burning anxiety and confusion, and had to immediately find another way to continue resisting these formidable enemies. The killer ran away cheerfully, convinced that he had completed the task, destroyed the catalyst stone. He was going to return and report the result to the ambush organizer. Noah still firmly held Viola in the midst of the tense magical vortex, and was surprised to see that another powerful energy began to rise from the delicate girl. Viola and Noah stood close to each other, wrapped in strange black auras. She barely contained the swirling power within her, although she had no catalytic stone left, when suddenly the ring on Noah's hand flared with bright light. Emitting a burst of mana, Viola realized in shock that this was the perfect replacement, the energy source she needed. Finding a chance to turn the course of events, Viola smiled confidently. She put all her will into it to connect with the mana from Noah's precious ring. From Viola's hand burst a powerful surge of magic and shot straight at the fleeing killer. He turned in horror, but it was already too late to dodge the devastating blow. Another explosion that shook the earth thundered in the abandoned forest. Its force split the ground and swept away everything in its path. The killer collapsed, his breathing was ragged from severe wounds. When Viola approached to interrogate him, she suddenly felt a dark presence approaching nearby. From the darkness burst a gigantic phantom beast in the form of a deer. Its eyes glowed ominously, sending a terrifying pressure that made everyone nearby tremble. The killer laughed wildly, thinking the beast was sent by his allies to rescue him, and looked at Noah and Viola with satisfaction, confident their fate was sealed. But suddenly the phantom beast attacked and instantly finished off the killer on the spot. Noah stood stunned, unable to understand what was happening, while the creature continued to roar. The killer's screams, full of pain, echoed through the forest and shook Viola. Noah was horrified by the brutal scene unfolding before his eyes. Viola was about to use a trick, but her mana was exhausted. Cold sweat appeared on her forehead before the looming beast. She realized this was a truly formidable enemy. Noah swiftly drew his sword and stood between Viola and the threat. Both tensed, preparing to face the colossal shadow in a desperate, fierce battle. A black, deer-like creature slowly dissolved before Noah and Viola's eyes, and Viola noticed that its aura was completely different from the usual phantom beasts she knew. Viola desperately searched for who was behind this, but Noah insisted. It was already too late. The dark entity had completely erased the killer, leaving no trace for interrogation. Standing in the empty clearing, Viola choked with regret and blamed herself. She was tormented by not stopping the beast in time, which took the life of this important witness. Noah wondered why the one behind everything killed his subordinate to hide everything, and Viola realized. The beast had its own will, a sign that this was far from over. A sea of questions swirled in the air. Why did Bart die? Where did the killer disappear to? And what was this mysterious phantom beast? But one thing was clear. A great conspiracy was weaving in the shadows. Viola increasingly suspected that among them was a mage from beyond the kingdom of Nemes. A sudden change in King Roy and his deliberate concealment of everything related to magic surfaced in her memory. When Viola asked if Noah suspected anyone in this matter, he directly named his uncle Tension, and cold calculation instantly appeared on both their faces. Noah admitted that his uncle had long coveted his title since their parents died, and from childhood he had to live cautiously and dared not trust anyone. Viola finally understood why Noah was called the Ice Duke, because of that harsh upbringing. Noah was stunned to learn that his uncle now had subordinates who could perform magic. Looking at the portrait of his uncle, Noah wondered, what true power hides behind the scenes? Viola noticed that the assassin's magical skills were not self-taught. They had been professionally honed. Someone taught the assassin how to handle mana. Viola was sure, very close to the Duke hides a person closely connected with magic. Clues about the uncle, magic, and the kingdom of Nemes intertwined into a mysterious veil, and Viola whispered to herself that she still had many hidden truths to uncover. Noah realized that standing here and thinking would yield nothing concrete, so he decided to go straight to his uncle and clarify the suspicions hanging over him. Noah and Viola walked together through the forest to the uncle's estate, both preparing for the stormy, dramatic meeting that awaited ahead. Somewhere far away, on a steep cliff amid a gloomy landscape, a snow-white deer suddenly appeared. It stood motionless as if someone was watching it, observing the group of Noah from afar. Soon the white deer turned and swiftly dashed into the forest thicket. Its brief appearance brought a strange, ominous premonition. Suddenly Cecilia appeared in a priest's robe, shouting Viola Vickland's name with a sneer, and confessed that Viola was an obstacle to their plans and that she was already about to kill her right there, in the middle of the wilderness. Cecilia silently stood on the height and watched as the figures of Noah and Viola disappeared into the distance. She barely smiled and whispered that at the last moment she changed her mind about killing them. Cecilia's face became sinister, her eyes cold, a black aura swirled around her, and she threw Viola a mysterious farewell, promising an unpleasant meeting in the future. The Dukefeld carriage traveled along treacherous mountain roads under a sky full of birds, and behind the calm exterior hid the dark intent of a mysterious woman. Sitting in the carriage, Viola quietly thought about the chaos in her Nemes, and could not understand how the kingdom had changed so much due to the intrigues of traitors. Noah explained that Nemes is now pursuing a policy of isolation, cutting off all contacts with the outside world, and asked if something was troubling Viola. Viola was sure. Between Nemes and the Duke's uncle there was a suspicious, foggy connection, and magic was the thread that bound them in a conspiracy to seize power. Noah explained that King Roy strictly forbade magic in Nemes. That foreigners use such power is extremely unnatural and clearly smells of conspiracy. He felt bitterness. Someone close had long deceived him, and Viola, although expelled, was still anxious about the fate of the kingdom. Viola Vikland was shocked by the thought that magic was spreading throughout Nemes. She clenched her teeth in anger, and her small hands tightened with anxiety. She panicked, fearing that Nemes intended to isolate her. Seeing her overly frightened expression, Noah calmly remarked that this was unlikely to happen. Jokes aside, Viola was overwhelmed with anxiety due to the appearance of mages and a mysterious spectral beast. It seemed to her that disaster was approaching them. Noah Rafe felt obliged to help learn more from Nemes for Viola's sake, and the girl was immensely grateful to the young Duke for his sincere and heartfelt assistance. Sitting in the carriage, Viola quietly looked out the window, worrying about the fate of the kingdom, and the image of her beloved father surfaced in her memory. Her heart clenched with sorrow. In the kingdom of Nemes, the air became oppressive when soldiers cruelly seized and arrested the young man, and he loudly shouted that he was innocent among the frightened people. The commander authoritatively announced that there was clear evidence of the youth's conspiracy. He planned to sneak into the castle. The youth desperately protested, insisting he had no intention to kill the king. Despite his desperate pleas, the soldiers angrily dragged him away. The young man's face twisted with horror as the accusation fell on him like from the sky. He was thrown into an iron cage wagon and helplessly taken away under the watchful eyes of the crowd, and his cries begging someone to believe him echoed through the street. But no one answered. Voices buzzed among the people. Everyone talked about strange disappearances lately, and feared that the kingdom's peace was threatened by mysterious forces. Rumors that daughters of shopkeepers and vendors were suddenly disappearing spread throughout the city. Missing persons posters plastered on the walls only fueled the growing terror. Standing in the great castle, a low voice asked what was happening in the country. The spiral stairs seemed to hide dark secrets. A gigantic magical device resembling a cannon was being launched. Ancient runes pulsed and shone. Cecilia stood next to King Roy and silently watched the operation of this destructive weapon. The soldiers could not help but doubt the true intent of the king who was creating this strange device. They anxiously wondered what it would be used for soon. Cecilia's gaze suddenly narrowed to vertical, monstrous pupils. With cold hands, she squeezed King Roy so tightly that he could not utter a word. Cecilia whispered magical words into King Roy's ear, insisting that he needed to know nothing more, and he gradually lost his will and completely came under her influence. King Roy walked behind Cecilia like a soulless man, his face empty and lifeless. While she wore a satisfied smile, after all, the plan was going smoothly. King Roy made strange grimaces as if struggling against someone else's control. But Cecilia's magic was too strong, and he quickly fell into a stupor. Cecilia addressed King Roy with false respect and urged him to keep going. She led the poor monarch toward the cruel treacheries that awaited ahead. In the quiet library, King Roy sat as if stunned at his desk under Cecilia's watchful eye. She asked how the Duke of Wickland was doing, the father of Viola Wickland. Cecilia said that the Duke of Wickland still stubbornly insisted on his daughter's innocence and advised him to accept the bitter truth instead of clinging to illusions. Smiling insidiously, Cecilia declared that this grave sin must fall on the Duke. Her demonic nature was revealed in how she mercilessly harmed the innocent. King Roy winced in pain, thinking of the loyal minister thrown into a cold dungeon. The image of the Duke of Wickland wasting away behind bars tormented his conscience. Cecilia pressed against the king, and, shifting all the blame onto Viola, insisted that the exile was justified, falsely accusing her of using magic to kill the king. Cecilia cast a threatening look and warned Roy never to forget what he had seen. The king trembled. He realized that now he was merely a puppet in her hands. Cecilia smiled triumphantly, watching as King Roy completely succumbed to her manipulations. With a cold gaze, she reminded the unfortunate king of her demands. Cecilia feigned a respectful farewell to Hopper and ordered that King Roy not be disturbed, and the puppet king merely nodded in his deep daze. Walking alone, Cecilia quietly pondered how to strengthen the spells over King Roy, fearing that if he suddenly saw the truth, their plans would collapse. Standing by the window and looking at the city, Cecilia dreamed of the day when the magical weapon would finally be ready, and she could capture the monode source. Years of silent waiting had ignited a thirst for revenge in her. Cecilia laughed maniacally, and at the thought of humanity, her face twisted with disgust. She hated people for stealing magic and vowed to make them pay dearly. Suddenly remembering today's visitors, Cecilia quickly shed her terrifying guise. She rushed back to the main hall to meet the uninvited guests. Noah's carriage finally stopped in front of the lavish old mansion. Noah got out of the carriage and solemnly said that he had not returned here for a very long time. A slender line of maids stood in ceremonial formation to greet Duke Noah Rafe, who had returned home. They announced that the master was waiting for him in the mansion's main hall. Noah stood before his uncle, a middle-aged man with an impeccably neat appearance. The uncle smiled as if welcoming him, and memories of his parents' funeral surfaced. Standing behind them, Viola Wickland quietly observed the uncle and the unfamiliar woman beside him. She wondered if that beauty, the beautiful woman, was his wife. Viola felt a strange unease from the woman who smiled before her. The woman politely bowed and said her name was Vivi. Noah's uncle raised an eyebrow in surprise and asked what Viola was doing next to his nephew, and Noah indifferently replied that for personal reasons he was looking after the girl. Cecilia, now pretending to be the mistress of the house, smiled mysteriously while watching the two young guests. The uncle invited Noah and Viola to sit for tea to begin the official conversation. Noah sat opposite his uncle in tense silence and began asking sharp, targeted questions, and the uncle responded sarcastically and provocatively, as if challenging him. Uncle decisively dismissed the accusations. He had sent neither murderers nor spies to Noah's estate and insisted that he had never given such an order to his subordinates. He wondered why anyone would commit such senseless acts. Meanwhile, Noah and Viola silently doubted the truthfulness of his words. A painful memory surfaced. A cold blade was aimed straight at the child's back. Noah silently thought about the lost chances to expose the enemy's crimes. Noah introduced Viola to his uncle, but his behavior spoke for itself as if he already knew everything. This excessive calmness aroused strong suspicion and alertness in Noah. Viola stared into the uncle's eyes, trying to notice even the slightest hint of something. She wondered if this man had uncovered her true identity. Uncle swallowed his tea and assured that a loving uncle like him would never harm Noah. These flowery words only made the atmosphere even tenser. He challenged Noah, "Bring concrete evidence of your baseless accusations." Viola and Noah both turned pale from the hypocrisy and self-confidence of each other. Uncle mocked, saying that Noah inherited his distrustfulness from his deceased parents. Noah fell silent. A fire of rage flared in his eyes at the very mention of his lost loved ones. The crystal chandelier brightly illuminated the hall but could not dispel the darkness. Behind the sparkle, dark schemes quietly unfolded. Viola bitterly regretted not using magic to record the conversation and expose the cunning uncle. Memories of the old family tragedy wounded her and left her broken and powerless. Young Louis appeared, clearly outraged that the wrongdoers were not punished, and Viola glanced at Noah, silently knowing that the path to justice would be difficult. Louis could not hide his delight upon seeing his cousin Noah rush to him and tenderly called him Big Brother. Noah smiled in response, while Viola stood aside quietly observing their closeness. To satisfy Louis's curiosity, she deftly introduced herself as Vivi, a girl under the Duke of Feld's guardianship due to special family circumstances, and Louis was impressed by her charming appearance and polite manners. Suddenly, a powerful magical shock burst forth. Stunning Violash froze, seeing behind Louis a mysterious ghostly entity radiating an incredibly strong, incomprehensible pressure. The mysterious spirit had a strange appearance, long pointed ears and cold, sharp eyes that watched everything. And Viola was stunned by the feeling of a fierce stream of secret magic bursting from inside little Louis. And the creature gave a stern warning no one was to approach Louis. The presence of this guardian spirit turned the peaceful room into an oppressive, tension-filled space. Viola froze in place, unable to believe that a familiar spirit could appear in this world. She hurriedly explained to Noah that the spirit was the corporeal embodiment of mana, a vital force for the wizards of the kingdom of Nemes. Viola shuddered when she realized that Noah could see spirits, a rare thing for those not from the kingdom of Nemes. Even the boy Louis seemed to sense that entity around him. The invisible pressure of the spirit suddenly flared and pushed Viola back. She retreated to keep a safe distance, having felt a hidden threat ready to burst from that monstrous creature protecting Louis. The spirit suddenly spoke, decisively stating that Viola was not a resident of this kingdom, noting that although a faint scent of magic smoldered from her, there was no mana in her, and even mentioned the disgusting stench of that woman. Seeing the spirit's dangerously inquisitive manner, Noah instantly stepped forward, decisively shielding Viola and loudly declaring that she was an important ally, demanding respect from the entity. In despair, Louis suddenly grabbed Noah's hand, and crying out in pain and whispering, "Please," begged his cousin to save his family and estate from the manipulations of dark fire. Dark forces secretly operate in the shadows. Louis quickly latched the door with a frightened expression so that the secret conversation would not leak outside. Viola noticed that vigilance in his eyes and understood how serious everything was. To guarantee absolute safety, Viola deployed a magical sound barrier from the ceiling that enveloped the entire room, and only then did Louis dare to confess the chilling truth. Everyone in the estate was controlled by a cunning woman named Cecilia. Noah cautiously asked about the woman who lived with his uncle, and Louis sadly recounted that immediately after his mother died of illness, His father suddenly brought Cecilia home as a new wife, and since then everyone in the family had started behaving strangely. Louis revealed a shocking secret. He saw what ordinary people did not notice. Once he accidentally witnessed his father performing terrible dark rituals in a locked room, and this deeply alarmed Viola. With a voice trembling from fear, Louis insisted that Cecilia was not human, because he felt an incredibly strong, sinister energy that always surrounded his stepmother whenever she appeared. Images of Cecilia began to form in Viola's mind, and she realized that she had met her before in the guise of a saint. Louis continued to beg Noah and Viola to find a way to save everyone, because neither he nor his guardian spirit could oppose her. In another room, the uncle became angry upon learning that someone dared to utter his name before Duke Noah, and he gritted his teeth with regret that he had not killed Noah decisively earlier. Then these current problems would not exist. Suddenly Cecilia appeared with a mysterious, sinister smile and gently whispered, "Calm down, uncle, leave everything to me," and then confidently declared that, until this moment, all the cards of the plan had been in her hands. Cecilia showed snake-like, frightening eyes and a sinister expression as she recalled that special thing people had. She was ready to do anything to take the ring back. It was the key link of her dark scheme. Cecilia mockingly laughed at Viola for locking the room, declared that the estate was under her control, and swore to get rid of Louis. For daring to betray her, Cecilia ordered the dark beasts to attack, calling them her favorite children, and these shadow creatures began to surround and threaten Viola's group. Viola recognized the enemy behind the door and signaled Noah. "Be on guard," because suddenly the scent of the Ma tribe spread in the air. Viola shouted to Noah to step back when the lock broke, and without any warning, a fierce surge of dark power burst into the room. Shadow beasts in the form of wolves simultaneously rushed to attack, and Viola instantly waved her hand. Magic burst from under her palm and threw back the fierce monsters. Noah clearly felt that the enemy sought to destroy them, and Viola was already ready to break through the ring of monsters surrounding the estate corridor. Suddenly the servants surrounded Viola and restrained her. She was shocked when she realized that they were all insane. Controlled by magic like puppets, she struggled, but there were so many servants that she could not move. Viola tried to calm the chaos, but with horror realized she had no monocatalyst stones. Viola noticed that Cecilia had removed all magical items from the estate, carefully preparing everything to completely neutralize the power of any opponents. And at that moment, a mysterious guardian spirit appeared, offering help. So drawing on its power, she released a wind spear directly at the monsters. A powerful magical surge from Viola passed through the rows of enchanted servants. Their gazes slowly changed, and they began to break free from Cecilia's control. The frightened maid looked at Louis, not understanding what had happened to her. Louis urged everyone, move quickly to a truly safe place. Viola's group found that all the doors were tightly sealed. Louis anxiously asked what to do next, because the estate had turned into a trap. Without hesitation, Viola used magic to break down the main door and cleared the way. Her determination stunned Noah. Viola led everyone into a room and immediately raised a barrier, reassuring them, "As long as you are inside, the monsters will not be able to get in." Louis firmly demanded to go with them, but Noah stopped him, insisting that it was a dangerous mission, and ordered him to stay and protect the servants. Viola suspected that Cecilia and Noah's uncle were conspiring. She calmed Louis and told him to let the adults handle it to the end. Louis gave his guardian spirit to Noah so that he would walk beside him and support him. The spirit promised to protect them in the confrontation with the Ma tribe. Louis silently stood and watched as Noah and Viola disappeared behind the door. He clenched his fists and quietly hoped that after the hard battle they would return alive. Viola observed the spirits, surprised that they agreed to help in the kingdom of Nemes. The connection between spirits and people was usually not deep. Once this land was filled with spirits, they always protected the soil and helped people maintain the balance of magic. Viola recalled her times as deputy captain in the kingdom of Nemes. Then she received alarming reports about the strange decrease in the number of spirits. The spirit remembered the moment when he met Louis. He was crying in the garden, and the spirit felt that the manor was threatened by those who used dark magic. Vai smiled and agreed to protect Louis at the spirit's request. Though small, in her eyes burned a determination that could shatter all of Cecilia's plans. When Vai arrived, the manor was covered with a magical ceiling. She quickly found a secret passage leading to another building, and everything was just beginning. Regarding the infiltration plan, the Feld family mansion towered in the silent space, and Viola soon felt something was wrong here. It permeated the entire building. Inside, Viola realized that everyone was deceived by primitive magic, and Noah doubted her words. The misty illusion began to dissipate, revealing the true appearance of the manor. Viola squinted and saw strange distortions hidden there. Viola sharply raised her hand. Magic burst out, tearing the enemy's veil. She explained to Noah that this was the effect of a magical array. Viola confidently stated that the main magic is located in the back building. Meanwhile, Cecilia appeared with a mysterious smile. Cecilia admitted that she does not know how to use brute force, but her eyes and movements radiated unpredictable danger. Viola and Noah stood firm, ready to face the enemy. An incredible tension hung in the main hall as the confrontation began. Viola and Noah moved deeper into the silent corridor of the manor. He felt the eerie silence enveloping his uncle's house. Viola warned Noah that a human does not rule here. Cecilia's appearance sharply changed the air around them. A wave of black darkness suddenly covered Viola. There was no time to react, and Cecilia revealed her ambitions by directly attacking the uninvited guests. Cecilia smiled triumphantly, enjoying Viola's shock. She coldly stated that this place is not for those who dare to interfere with the plans of the Mao tribe. Cecilia mocked Viola's childish appearance. Could not comprehend that once a renowned deputy captain of magic had become so small and weak. She firmly gripped Viola's face and threatened to make her pay. Viola froze, shocked that Cecilia knew her true identity and past. Cecilia radiated a dense, deadly aura and revealed that she belonged to the Ma tribe. Viola felt a wave of sinister energy roll through the other's body. Cecilia said that her target was not Viola, but something else. She despised humans and considered them inferior beings unworthy of opposing her. Cecilia looked at Noah with a hungry gaze and demanded that he give the Ma tribe the important ring he held in his hands. Noah categorically refused to give the ring to anyone, and Cecilia coldly smiled as if she had anticipated such fierce resistance. Without hesitation, Noah drew his sword and lunged at Cecilia. He recognized the creature before him as a monster and was determined to destroy it immediately. Cecilia easily dodged Noah's sharp blade with stunning speed. She mocked his futile attempt, considering humans too weak. Cecilia laughed wildly as her body began to transform into a terrifying moth form. Viola watched in horror as the dark power rose right before her eyes. Cecilia taunted Noah for daring to swing his sword at a noble lady, but a demonic cruelty was evident in her smile. Noah felt that he was facing no ordinary opponent when his blade suddenly stopped. Viola warned that the power of this creature was no less than that of a shadow beast. Cecilia resorted to dark magic. Her grip squeezed Noah's throat and lifted him into the air, and she threatened to kill him if he did not hand over the precious ring. In a desperate moment, Noah hastily threw several magical stones toward Vivi and begged her to counterattack immediately before it was too late. When Aunt Cecilia revealed her true face, Louis froze and trembled, could not believe that his home had turned into such a dreadful battlefield. Viola caught the magical stones that Noah knocked down and threw, and praised his agility, although just a minute ago she had asked to wait a little longer. Viola quickly helped Noah regain his balance as soon as he broke free from the grip. Cecilia looked coldly, as if plotting something even more sinister. Louis froze in shock. His father suddenly appeared beside Cecilia, and the guardian spirit also sensed the dark energy lurking nearby. Louis tried his best to explain something to his father, but it seemed that he was already completely under Cecilia's control, and the mysterious woman with a confident smile watched the despair on the boy's face. Louis's father froze in horror when he saw thick black smoke envelop his son, and a black, impenetrable shadow began to tightly wrap around Louis, preventing him from moving or calling for help. Cecilia cruelly declared that her promise not to touch Louis no longer held power. She coldly brushed off the father's pleas and continued to weave her dark magic. When Viola saw Louis in danger, she instantly shouted, "Cecilia, release the boy immediately." She was preparing to use magic to intervene in this terrible distortion. Cecilia sneered contemptuously at Viola's resistance. She believed that a child with a special magical gift like Louis was the perfect subject for her new dark experiments. Viola was stunned. Cecilia was casting the Mabist transformation spell right before her eyes. It was an extremely evil, forbidden technique that could destroy the bearer's soul forever. Viola assured that she had never heard of such a spell, and Cecilia snorted contemptuously, saying that uneducated people would never understand the essence of magic possessed only by the demon race. Cecilia finally revealed her true identity. She was from the Ma tribe, and Viola paled in shock, realizing she was dealing with an enemy far more dangerous than she had expected. Cecilia admitted that she had hunted and experimented on all the spirits in the area. Louis' guardian spirit trembled at the cruel truth about the fate of his comrades. The spirit choked with grief upon learning that it was Cecilia who had exterminated his kind. She only smiled indifferently and said that keeping a few survivors was a pastime for her. Cecilia's smile grew crueler as she sensed the despair of her opponents. It seemed she enjoyed sowing terror throughout all living things. Cecilia coldly turned to Louis and declared that the boy would be the next victim. The black mist swirling around her began to penetrate his body. The maw that had swallowed her previous experiments had not brought great success, but she placed huge hopes on Louis, believing that he might withstand this power. Louis froze before Cecilia with wide eyes of fear. He could not comprehend how his once gentle aunt had turned into such a fierce demon. Viola and Noah desperately rushed to save Louis, but they were too late. A dark light flared, signaling that the Ma Beast transformation was complete. Darkness engulfed the guardian spirit Louis, devouring his last purity, while Cecilia watched with pleasure, without pity and without remorse. Louis froze in horror before the huge, threatening shadow. A terrible transformation turned his friend's spirit into a distorted, wild, dark creature. Viola froze. Before her eyes, the gentle guardian spirit turned into an enraged beast of the crowd, and this terrible change surpassed everything she had ever known about magic. Cecilia could not contain her admiration. The latest experiment gave the desired result, and she looked triumphantly at her creation, sincerely rejoicing in its new power. Although the newly created Ma Beast was somewhat unstable, Cecilia still believed in its power and cruelly asked Louis how it felt to possess a new, powerful body. Louis completely broke down, watching as his spirit vanished right before his eyes, and just stood rooted to the spot, helplessly sobbing, unable to do anything to save his friend. Cecilia curled her lips and disdainfully said that the rest were now worthless. She ordered the new crowd monster to immediately finish off Vi and Noah, turning the battlefield into a graveyard. Little Louis watched in horror as his friend's spirit turned into a terrible monster. He shouted his name through despair, and his heart broke from pain. The black, like a bottomless maw, monster swung its sharp, blade-like claws at Louis. The poor boy fell to the floor, completely helpless before the frenzied attack of the creature he once loved. The situation became critical. The monster was preparing a fatal blow. Louis squeezed his eyes shut, and expecting the worst, froze, while everyone around recoiled from the deadly threat. At the decisive moment, Noah jumped forward in time and put up his sword to intercept the Ma Beast's swing. He was ready to protect Louis at any cost. The terrible force of the creature's strike shattered the stone floor into pieces. Noah silently admired this terrible power, born of the forbidden art of the Ma tribe. Louis shouted in complete confusion, still not believing that the spirit could harm him. Cecilia smiled ominously and declared that now it was ordered to attack people. Noah tightly pressed Louis to himself, protecting him while the Ma Beast growled and prepared for the next attack. He tried not to panic in order to find a vulnerable spot. Viola silently glanced at the devastated stage and realized, although the spirit had turned into a beast, Louis's call still seemed to have some influence. Viola instantly understood who they were dealing with and warned Noah. The Ma Beast's body currently had no physical form. It was merely a concentration of magical energy. She added, it had no body, so people could not touch or destroy it by usual means. That was the hardest part of the confrontation. Noah listened to Viola's explanation with a serious expression. Louis anxiously asked if there was any way to return the spirit to its original form. The mobile monster inside the black smoke continued to change, and Viola felt it had not yet fully absorbed the magical energy, so a ray of hope remained. Viola insisted that acting right now could save the spirit. Louis was glowing with joy, but warned that this method would be very dangerous. Viola explained that in the dark world of magic, there are forbidden arts magical techniques that contradict the laws of nature and are extremely difficult to control. She spoke of forbidden art that could transform a creature into another form. Viola believed she had the power to reverse the transformation on the monster named Black Maw. Louis could not believe his Isa little girl with such deep knowledge, and Viola firmly declared that the pride of the Ma Adept from the kingdom of Nemes would not allow her to retreat. Viola hesitated a little. It was an unforeseen emergency, and Louis grabbed her hand, desperately begging to save his only close friend. Louis promised to do everything necessary to help the guys. Determined gaze helped Viola to dare and take it upon herself. This is a risky adventure. Viola prepared clothes and tools to start drawing the magic circle, and quietly reminded Louis that everything would depend heavily on the connection between him and the spirit. Viola, calm and confident, began to move as if death itself was walking beside her. She proclaimed that a true Modept would never abandon those who found themselves in trouble right before her eyes. Viola boldly declared that she would show everyone her true power. Louis looked at her with deep admiration, and his faith in salvation began to flare up again. Viola laughed heartily. She was burning with impatience to try forbidden art after a long exile. A spark of genius gleamed in her eyes. Cecilia coldly interrupted, reminding everyone not to forget about her, and disdainfully considered Viola's efforts as only hopeless tricks against the power of darkness. Cecilia was frightened from all sides, but Viola Vikland remained unshakable. She understood that Cecilia was straining to hold the monster, while Viola herself was strangely calmly observing the enemy. Vivi asked Louis if he had kept any spirit conduits, and he nodded. The spirit once gave him a crystallized part of its body as a keepsake. Viola froze in amazement when Louis admitted that he kept a crystallized fragment of the spirit's body. It was the last decisive piece she needed to turn everything back. Realizing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, Viola resolutely announced that she had found the fastest way to resolve the situation. Behind her, the monster, Black Maw, was wildly roaring, unaware of its inevitable fate. Viola suddenly rushed at the huge maw beast with stunning speed. She authoritatively ordered the dark creature not to move in order to reach its weak spot. Viola's courage stunned Cecilia. She froze and worried, not knowing what would happen next. Meanwhile, Noah and Louis, holding their breath, watched every small movement of the girls intently. Viola stretched out her hand and touched directly the pulsating core of the magical energy of Mob Beast. From the point of contact, a beam of light spread a sign of the beginning of a complex magical procedure. She explained that magical formulas always retain traces of the one who invoked them and the channel through which they passed. And if Viola uses the original spirit guide, she will be able to reverse the entire corruption process. Cecilia paled when she realized that Viola had made the spirit's body the conduit of forbidden magic. She could not believe that the child dared such a reckless and dangerous act. Noticing Cecilia trying to intervene and disrupt the plan, Noah immediately swung his sword to block her path. He resolutely defended the space so that Viola could carry out this crucial task. Noah declared that he was now Cecilia's opponent and did not let her approach. Meanwhile, Viola was holding back the enormous magical pressure of the beast from the crowd with her last strength. In agony from the forced transformation, Viola still uttered Louis's name. The boy was terribly worried, seeing how his new friend risked her life for the sake of his guardian spirit. Louis tried to calm himself and fully trusted Viola's talent. He fervently begged her to return the spirit to its gentle original form. Streams of black darkness began to tear apart from the pure light bursting from the matrix, and the cleansing proceeded powerfully, repelling the impurity created by Cecilia, the so-called dark magic. Louis nostalgically recalled that lonely time when his father and everyone in the estate suddenly changed, and the appearance of the spirit then was the only solace that helped him overcome fear. Memories that the guardian spirit always stood nearby vividly surged into Louis's consciousness. It was precisely the spiritual connection between them that was the key to successful cleansing. The bright light gradually faded, and before them appeared the familiar figure of the keeper's spirit fully restored. Louis could not contain his surprise and joy seeing his friend return to his usual form. Viola exclaimed with delight the plan succeeded better than they had imagined. Louis burst into tears and rushed forward to embrace the guardian spirit after so many terrible events. Viola confessed, using forbidden arts always entailed risks, even the dissolution of the soul. The saved guardian spirit looked at her with deep, grateful eyes. Cecilia trembled with rage, watching as the child ruined her flawless plan, and stood looking at the rubble with a face full of distrust and bitterness. When the problem was resolved, Viola coldly turned to face Cecilia. She demanded a mouth that would reveal all the information she had deliberately hidden. With a sinister, cruel smile, Viola prepared for a merciless interrogation of Cecilia, and her terrifying expression made even Noah and Louis shudder. When everything turned against her, Cecilia decided to retreat, leaving chaos behind, while Louis's father quotas lay motionless on the floor as the boy panicked, calling his name. When Cecilia's darkness began to dissipate, Viola shouted in anger for her to stop, and the demon's threatening warning still echoed in the silence. Cecilia openly poured out her deep hatred for humanity for those who stole magic, and in the name of the Ma tribe's pride, she vowed to destroy all humans. The enemy disappeared completely, and Noah, worried, asked Viola if it was possible to track his magical signature, and she admitted that the enemy had a map. The magic was so different that it could not be tracked. Viola froze. The enemy turned out to be from the Ma tribe and seemed to know who she really was. Behind them, Louis stood in despair beside his newly awakened father. In the main hall, Uncle Noah painfully admitted that he had been under Cecilia's mental control all this time. Everyone fell silent, listening to his repentant story. Noah, his voice trembling, told about the tragedy of his parents and how he could not stop Cecilia's rage. Suddenly, Louis exploded fiercely, denied it. Louis unexpectedly challenged his uncle, while Viola and Duke Noah watched from behind. The boy asked if he really thought he could hide his crimes forever, pointed at the table with his finger, and insisted that he knew well the crimes committed by his father. The truth about the dark conspiracy behind closed doors began to emerge. Lewis clenched a suicide note in his hand, clear evidence pointing to the main conspirator. He insisted that he saw his uncle writing those lines, filled with a treacherous conspiracy. Noah took the letter, and with horror recognized that the names, places, and dates in the murder order matched exactly. This exactly matches that past tragedy. The spirit confirmed that Lewis was telling the truth. He admitted that he then felt a distorted, magical aura emanating from his uncle. Seeing the irrefutable evidence, the uncle began to panic and get angry. Noah claimed that all the acts of murder stemmed from the uncle's selfish desire. The uncle bitterly recalled how he differed from his late brother. He was consumed by envy because the talented brother inherited a prosperous estate and the father's respect. With an ambitious gleam in his eyes, he proclaimed that the world is inherently unfair and believed that only those with strength and determination should rule. He admitted that the mysterious Cecilia approached him and proposed a cruel plan promised to make him a nobleman if he agreed to help end the family. He seemed to confess indifferently that he fell into Cecilia's trap. The benefits were too tempting. According to his calculations, everything would have been perfect if Noah had not miraculously survived the cleansing. In despair, the uncle openly admitted that he ordered the murder. He believed that the matter had come to this, so there was no point in hiding anymore. When everyone was distracted, Uncle took advantage of the moment, and with magic instantly burned that compromising letter in Noah's hand, then triumphantly exclaimed that now, without evidence, no one could accuse him. Noah froze at this brazen act, and the traitor with a smug smile challenged him, "Arrest me if you dare." But Viola remained calm and quietly signaled Noah to be silent. Suddenly a voice sounded, repeating Uncle's confession word for word, and Uncle froze in horror. He looked around, not understanding why his voice seemed to come from nowhere. Viola smiled triumphantly, pulled out a shining magical crystal, and revealed that through his arrogance she had secretly recorded the entire confession. The fire spirit mocked the villain's stupidity, who underestimated Viola's power. Uncle opened his mouth to object, but any words were now useless. Noah stepped forward, approached the culprit with a look of righteous anger and unwavering determination, and warned him prepare for severe punishment. The punishment of royal justice. Uncle fell unconscious. Viola and Noah pondered how dangerous it would be to let him escape, and Louis stood silently watching as the man who destroyed his family was taken away. Standing by the window, Louis replayed in his mind the heavy duty he had just performed to protect his lineage, and realized that Cecilia was the source of all current evil. The fire spirit lingered its gaze on the majestic mountains and warmly recalled the proud history of this land, once a prosperous land where spirits and humans lived together. Servants and the steward burst into the room in panic, searching for Louis. Worried about his safety, they fervently begged him not to commit any more reckless acts. Louis, not hiding his surprise, asked if they really recognized him after everything that had happened. The maid firmly assured him that they had always remembered and respected their young master. The boy burst into tears when he saw that everyone was freed from the magical manipulation, and returned to their usual state. Happy tears streamed down his battered face. Viola smiled brightly. The forbidden spell had finally disappeared. Louis wiped his eyes and thanked her warmly, filled with joy. He was finally free from the traitor's control. Having made sure everything was settled, Noah and Viola sighed with relief and froze for a moment in silence, knowing that the road back to Nemes would still be difficult. Noah sincerely thanked Viola for helping to expose the traitor in time, and she smiled in response and said that helping others with magic was a great honor for her. Viola firmly said that the task of a motive is to use their power to serve people. Noah looked at the girl with trusting eyes and felt how lucky he was to have her nearby. Viola showed the kingdom of Nemesis, the magical stone, irrefutable evidence against the uncle, but she feared that in her child form her words would carry less weight. Noah froze in thought. He needed to find a way to restore Viola to her true form. Suddenly, he remembered the ring Viola had mentioned and began asking questions, took out the ring, and Viola was struck by how familiar it was to her. He said it was a precious item, given to him 10 years ago by the one who saved his life. Noah recalled the image of the red-haired girl who pulled him out of that past trouble. The ring bore the ancient coat of arms of the kingdom of Nemes and the engraved name Vikland. In a shocking moment, Viola confessed that she was the one who gave Noah the ring, and finally the truth about that fateful connection 10 years ago surfaced. Noah shuddered with horror, remembering how in the deep forest, fleeing from killers, he suddenly fainted, and he could not understand what miracle saved his life then. Amid the magical smoke, a tiny girl suddenly appeared. Her worried eyes meeting Noah's gaze, thus began the fateful meeting that forever changed their lives. The girl approached and gently asked how Noah felt in the silence of the night forest. This image was etched in his memory and became what supported him for 10 years. The The story rewound into the past, a lesson about ethics and duties of Medeps. The professor explains that magic is a sacred tool to protect the people of Nemes. While other students attentively listened to the lecture about wind magic, Viola was drawn to other knowledge secretly. She studied rituals and catalysts. 10-year-old Viola trembled with excitement when she discovered witchcraft, a tempting, heretical magic. She told herself that these forbidden teachings were much more interesting than ordinary magic. Ancient tomes said, "Witchcraft is not a gift from birth, but a matter of careful preparation. Anyone could create it if they mastered the rituals and necessary magical components." Viola bitterly endured the injustice. Only citizens of Nemesis could use the permitted magic. She passionately wanted to bring witchcraft to those living beyond the kingdom's borders to change their lives. On the pages were intricate magical circles and powerful ancient seals. Viola noticed that this non-traditional magic seemed to have much greater power than usual. The library was bursting at the seams with old documents, stuffed with long-forgotten knowledge. Some pages were written so archaically that even Viola could barely read them. Viola worried about the risks if the teleportation spell was performed incorrectly. She feared that one tiny mistake could result in unpredictable consequences for the kingdom. Despite the danger, Viola's passion for research and discoveries did not fade, and she decided to try this new magic at any cost to prove her theory. Viola stealthily slipped through the corridor, looking for a spacious and secluded place for the experiment. And it was then that she accidentally overheard Maudette's conversation. The talks were about a huge breach in the royal wall, a consequence of the destruction left by magical beasts, and the adepts were hastily drafting a plan for its repair. Viola smiled slyly upon hearing about a secret exit outside the city. She realized this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to test her skills. After lessons, Viola secretly took her stack of manuscripts and quietly approached the breach in the wall. She carefully looked around so that no one would see her. Viola fought her way through a narrow crack in the towering stone wall of Nemesis. Although she nearly fell face forward, she was determined to get out and explore the world. Breathing free air for the first time, Viola broke into a smile, enjoying the view around. She quickly unpacked her gear and prepared for the most important experiment of her life. Viola carefully checked the magical crystals in the pouch. She knew that each stone contained valuable energy needed for the teleportation experiment. The 10-year-old Viola trembled with excitement. Drawing a magic circle and calculating the necessary distances, she believed that if she performed the ritual correctly, the heretical teleport would succeed. Immediately after activating the magic, Viola found herself on a windy, unfamiliar hill. She stood stunned, not understanding where she had landed after the instant teleport. Suddenly, Viola saw that a large breach in the kingdom's wall was being sealed, and she panicked, realizing that if the only exit was closed, she might not be able to return. Bright magical light enveloped Viola as she tried to teleport again. Anxiety was visible on her face due to strange distortions of space around her. Dust and smoke dispersed after a small magical explosion. Viola coughed. She tried to stay on her feet and reorient herself amid the dim, gloomy scene. When she opened her eyes, Viola realized she was lying in a dense, unfamiliar forest. She anxiously wondered where she was, as it was completely different from the place where she had stood moments before. Although she was initially scared, she burst with joy when she realized the teleport had truly succeeded. It was convincing proof of her innate talent for unconventional arts. Viola quickly noted the coordinate deviations to refine the formula. She was burning with desire to continue experiments and find out how far she could go. During her inspection, Viola came across a broken carriage, and bodies of soldiers scattered around. She froze, realizing that a terrible tragedy had just occurred here. Viola was gripped by panic when she saw someone lying motionless in a pool of blood on the cold grass. She trembled, not knowing if the poor soul was still alive. A strange sound made Viola jump and retreat. She looked for a place to hide. She realized the assailant was still lurking nearby, and the tragedy was far from over. The cold-blooded killer with a sharp sword approached the pitiful boy. A merciless spark lit up in his eyes. He was preparing to deliver the final blow. Viola hid behind a bush, her heart pounding as she watched the horrific scene unfold. The boy lay there with a desperate look, too weak to resist. Viola told herself she had to find help as soon as possible. She lacked the strength to confront the killer, and she feared that even a minute of hesitation could turn into a tragedy. But suddenly, the crack of a branch underfoot accidentally revealed Viola to the killer, and she froze in horror as his icy gaze fell directly on her. Viola realized she could not run away like a coward and leave the poor boy to die. She decided to act. Act to save the victim's life. Memories of lessons on Amedup's duties in Nemes flooded Viola, and she clearly recalled being taught to use strength to protect the weak. Viola clenched her fists, and promised to become a true Modka who always stands on the side of justice. This unwavering determination helped her overcome fear and boldly rush toward danger. With incredible courage, little Viola stepped out of hiding to protect little Noah, and resolutely declared that she would not allow anyone to be unjustly sacrificed. Viola shouted sharply at the killer to stop. Her sudden appearance shocked him. He froze, seeing the child who dared to intervene. She pointed at the killer and decisively ordered him to immediately stay away from the boy. Viola focused. Magic began to thicken in her hands. She was preparing to release a powerful offensive spell, and warned the assassin that he would pay dearly if he acted recklessly. The killer froze, seeing Viola's magical aura. He could hardly believe that before him stood a wizard from the kingdom of Nemes. Despite the sword in her hands, Viola risked using direct magic. She was ready to go to the end to protect Noah's life. Viola stood against the cruel killer who threatened her and the boy Noah, and a cold fear rose in her chest. She realized that she had not yet fully mastered the complex spells taught at school to confidently fight in real combat. The killer froze in surprise. A little girl suddenly appeared in the dark forest, and he could not understand where she came from. The assassination plan did not mention any strangers in that area. A cruel gleam lit up in his eyes as he stepped toward Viola with a sharp sword. He said that although his superiors did not approve of killing innocents, as soon as her presence became known, he could not allow the girl to live and reveal the secret. At that terrible moment, horror gripped Viola. The killer raised his sword to deliver a deadly blow, and she regretted not paying more attention in magic lessons in Nemes than perhaps she could have protected herself. Seeing no other way out, Viola resorted to a small trick. She threw a handful of sand at the killer to distract his attack. She knew it was a bit unfair, but the desperate situation forced her to do everything to save them both. The killer was temporarily blinded. He began to curse, and Viola fervently begged the boy Noah to take the chance and run. She feared there was little time before the enemy regained his sight and mercilessly resumed the chase. Viola thought with deep sadness about her parents, standing alone in the forest on the thin line between life and death, and despair overwhelmed her at the thought that she might quietly sacrifice herself in this cursed place, and no one would find out. Viola looked at the weak catalysts left in her hand and realized there was no strength left for powerful spells. She was gripped by complete panic. She did not know how to defeat the killer with such meager magic. The sense of honor and duty of a member of the Viklund clan helped Viola to gather herself again, and she whispered to herself that she must act like a true royal, Modopt, boldly standing up to protect the weak from all threats of evil. Viola boldly stepped forward to stop the killer, calling Noah to run and find a safer place, while the villain, angered by the child's stubbornness, swore that she would pay with her life for her interference. The killer loudly declared that today none of the children would escape his hands, no matter how strong their struggle was. Viola stood like a shield, tensely searching for the slightest gap to give Noah a chance to escape safely. The ruthless killer rushed forward, aiming to kill Viola instantly with one cold, decisive blow. She closed her eyes and prepared for the worst, while the dormant magic in her body began to awaken strangely and powerfully. Suddenly, the ring on Viola's hand exploded with dazzling light and incredible magical power, stunning both her and the killer. She could hardly believe her eyes when a huge energy burst from the trinket that seemed completely ordinary. The blinding glow of the ring exploded with powerful magic, throwing Viola and the killer in opposite directions, and she gasped with delight before her eyes unfolded a supernatural force that went far beyond everything she knew about heretic magic. The killer found himself at the very epicenter of the magical explosion and had no time to do anything. He howled in pain before being wildly thrown away amid the choking smoke raised by the enormous energy of the ring in the deep forest. When the dust settled, Viola and Noah were unharmed under the miraculous protective power of the ring, but both were stunned after together, experiencing a dramatic moment between life and death in the silent, dark forest. Viola froze, looking around at the destruction and realizing that the extraordinary power came not from her, but from the activation of the ring. She quietly felt happy that this fateful gift saved them at the moment when everything seemed hopeless. After that frightening moment, Viola suddenly felt inspired and wondered if she was a natural talent in magic. A radiant smile appeared on her face, and she was already imagining a brilliant future as the most outstanding Modopt of the kingdom. Viola instantly suppressed her pride and rushed to worry about Noah's condition, hastily checking him for serious injuries after the fierce magical explosion, looking for a way to help the poor boy. Viola gently asked his name, hoping to get acquainted and continue protecting the boy on the difficult road ahead. Sincere concern for the new friend she met amid danger was evident in her eyes. Dangerous and extraordinary circumstances. Noah could not hold back tears, spoke about his parents, broken-hearted over the tragedy that befell his noble family, while Viola gently comforted him and insisted that now was not the time for mourning. The most important thing was to immediately take him to a truly safe place. The two set off through the dense forest in search of an exit, and Viola felt that the air here was different, full of magic, and not at all like in Nemes. She wondered if they had ended up in a foreign land unknown to the kingdom and what she had not been taught. Viola smiled encouragingly at Noah to help him overcome fear and fatigue after the terrible events, and Noah looked at her with admiration and trust, seeing in her a savior who brought the only spark of hope into his turbulent life. Viola struck her chest and promised that she would one day become a genius motive to protect Noah. She was sure she could handle any villain and return him home unharmed, boldly asking Noah to trust her completely and deciding to get him out of the forest at any cost, regardless of any difficulties. Little Viola, with a self-satisfied smile, enjoyed her natural talent, believing that saving Noah was quite natural for a prodigy, but suddenly realized that she no longer had any catalyst and began to fear that without them her magic would look like cheap tricks. Having made sure she was fine, Viola took Noah by the hand and led him through the dense forest, resolutely stating that they needed to set off together immediately to get out of this dangerous place as soon as possible and return to civilization. After a long journey, they suddenly noticed a lively town spread out under a clear, sunny sky. Viola froze in place, her eyes full of surprise and curiosity. She saw landscapes and architecture beyond the kingdom of Nemes for the first time. Viola realized she was standing in the town of Lilua in the distant kingdom of Altian beyond the border. She quietly marveled at herself, and she understood that teleportation had thrown her a stunning distance, much farther than an ordinary magic student could control. Overcoming her initial surprise, Viola regained her usual confidence and blossomed with a radiant, satisfied smile, considering herself a true genius for covering such a long distance with a simple spatial spell. But anxiety quickly crept into Viola's mind when she thought about tense international relations as the daughter of a ducal family serving at the royal court of Nemes. She knew well that she would get into serious trouble if the people of Altian found out her true identity. Approaching the town, Viola decided to stop and say goodbye to Noah because she could not go with him into the crowd. Seeing his worried face, she quickly calmed him and promised to give him a special protective amulet. She took off the precious ring of the Duke's family that she always wore, carefully placed it in his palm, and assured him that it would become an important talisman to help him endure future trials when she could no longer protect him. Noah froze in amazement upon learning that it was an important betrothal ring, and Viola just laughed and declared that studying magic was much more interesting and important to her than any promises of engagement, so she would not waste her innate talent on nonsense. Viola explained that a powerful magical energy was hidden in the ring, which would help him in a world without magic, like Altian. Noah sincerely thanked his young savior and told how suspicious men had previously cruelly pursued his family's carriage. That fateful meeting ended with Viola waving goodbye and hurrying away, hiding her trail, while Noah was left standing stunned, looking at her brave figure. He quietly promised to always cherish this memory and hoped to one day repay the girl who saved his life. Returning to the present, Duke Noah Rayfeld looked at Viola with a nostalgic, deep gaze and admitted that from the first day of their meeting in this estate, he felt a strange familiarity, as if they had been connected long ago. Finally, Noah was convinced. Viola was the same girl who once saved him from death in the forest. Viola smiled and confirmed this, pointing to the ring on his hand as undeniable proof of their fate. Noah felt relief upon learning that Viola had safely returned to Nemes after that turbulent journey. Viola also told that despite all difficulties, she was lucky to find herself in a country rich in magical catalysts. It was they who allowed her to survive and find her way home. Noah Rafe, noble and one who valued honor, sincerely thanked Viola for once saving his life. Viola looked at the gentleman and mentally marveled at how that tearful boy had grown into a reserved, skilled man. Not missing a chance, she again took her usual arrogance and declared that saving was the obvious duty of a brilliant grandmadapt, and Noah could not help but laugh, recalling it all. Those grand proclamations etched themselves into his childhood memories. Noah extended the precious ring back and offered to return it to Viola, knowing it was an important family relic. But Viola gently smiled and refused, asking him to keep it as a special bond between them. Recalling the past, Noah teased her with words about the ring, and she immediately blushed with embarrassment. A shy awkwardness appeared on the proud sorceress's face, when naive, full of misunderstandings. Suddenly, a childhood memory of the forest surfaced. Viola hastily dismissed Noah's teasing and tried to explain that she had no such intention then, insisting that it was precisely the presence of the ring because of the energy in it that allowed him to use magic all these years. With a determined look, Viola asked Noah to keep the ring as proof of their side-by-side in future battles. She wanted him to see her as a reliable ally, ready to face any threat with him for the sake of protecting their ideals and kingdom. Viola suggested that Noah keep her close so she could support him with magic. Seeing her determination, Noah smiled in agreement and believed in the abilities of his young savior. They began discussing the situation. The kingdom of Nemes was completely closed, and Noah was worried because even caravans with provisions were no longer allowed through the city gates. Viola fell silent, pondering the difficulties ahead, and Louis nearby could not hide his anxiety. Penetrating the sealed kingdom was a huge challenge. Louis reported that his father still refused to say anything about the murder conspiracy, but Viola quickly switched gears and rushed to look for evidence in transaction records related to the Ma clan. Among old documents, Viola accidentally came across information about a secret transporter. This could be the only key to return to Nemes unnoticed. Viola and Louis analyzed the signatures on the papers and found a new transportation request. The destination Nemes, a land rich in magical resources where they so longed to return. With shining, hopeful eyes, Viola suggested asking the transporter to take them into the city. Louis, though wary of the danger, hesitated, but Viola insisted they had no other choice. Viola had a calculated, cold expression on her face and declared that for the sake of the goal she was ready to use both force and money. Noah, seeing this, only broke into a sweat at her audacity. Wasting no time, Viola ordered the group to set out in search of the transporter. Her determination at 6 years old impressed Noah and slightly worried him before the journey. The journey began in a dense forest near the kingdom's border. Noah asked where they were going, and Viola was tired. It was hard for her to keep moving constantly in a child's body. Childlike weakness exhausted Viola to the core. She fell to the ground, shocked that her current body no longer had the strength she had when she was an adult sorceress. Noah approached and asked how she was, seeing that she was lying on the grass and breathing heavily. Viola only sighed. What an inconvenient body this was. This was something she had never had to worry about before. Feeling that the situation was bad, Noah decided to act to keep the trip moving. He looked seriously at Viola, and she felt as if something unexpected was about to happen. Noah suddenly lifted Viola into his arms, catching her off guard and making her blush with embarrassment. The Duke's impulsive act left Viola confused in his reliable embrace. Despite her quiet objections, Noah calmly carried Viola deeper into the forest, and Viola felt deep humiliation. She no longer resembled the adult she once was, but looked only like a protected child. After a long journey through the forest, they finally reached their destination. As soon as she was set down, Viola immediately insisted that everything was fine. She needed at least a little to regain her dignity before the Duke. Before them stood a small wooden hut, lost in the middle of the wild wilderness. It was the hideout of a secret transporter, which Viola had carefully searched for in the records. They cautiously entered the wooden house to meet the mysterious man. Viola looked around the room and immediately felt tension radiating from the figure waiting there. Lulua held a wooden sword, stood on guard, and tensely asked who these uninvited guests were. Viola confidently stepped forward and said she knew him as a well-known underground transporter with great experience. Noah quickly diffused the tension by reminding Lulua that he was once hired to kill Duke Feld many years ago, and this revelation stunned the transporter. His old secret had surfaced. Thinking he would be handed over to the guards, Lula became wary, but Viola immediately reassured him. They had not come to arrest him, but to ask him for something. Viola asked Lulua to help them sneak into the kingdom of Nemes through secret paths known only to him. Lulua fell silent, thoughtfully weighing the benefits and dangers of this mission. To their surprise, Lulua decisively refused Viola, and Noah's tempting offer. His words stunned them both, and the plan instantly fell apart. Lulua sharply declared that all dealings with Nemes were stopped. It was too dangerous. He even mockingly ridiculed Viola, saying she was a bored noblewoman seeking thrills for amusement. Lula sharply told them to find someone else to risk the next Viola. Viola was offended by this contempt, but refused to give up. The goals still hung over her. Viola realized that with Lulua's refusal, things would not get easier. She worried about lower-income trade with Nemes had stopped. This complicated the payment. Suddenly, Viola had an idea, and she told Noah to show Lulua the family ring. Lulua watched them warily from behind the counter. He behind the counter was clearly stunned. Noah handed the ring to Lulua to examine, and the transporter instantly recognized the noble crest Viola confirmed. It was not a mere trinket, but a symbol of power of the prestigious House Wickland. Viola noticed that Lulua could read ancient inscriptions on secret papers, and when he admitted that he once traded with the kingdom and therefore understood everything, the negotiations immediately sped up significantly. Viola made a bold proposal. If he helps them get to Nemes, she will make Lulua a merchant with the support of the Vikland family. Lulua froze at the scale of this promise. Viola tried to press, relying on the status of the eldest daughter of a respected house, but immediately Blushage realized she sounded too arrogant. Lula looked again at the ring and thought to himself that he never expected to meet an exile for forbidden arts here. Viola was embarrassed, could not understand how that man could know that secret. Lulua admitted that he was once the deputy commander of the Magic Knights Corps in Nemes. He had no intention of arresting Viola because he had lost faith in what the kingdom had become. Lulua led them to a small, inconspicuous house deep in the forest and explained that this is exactly how one can live freely, beyond the watchful eye of the royal army. Lula put his hand on the table and decided to trust Viola's proposal. He acknowledged that his former deputy was highly trusted by subordinates, so he would give them an important opportunity. Viola rejoiced and quickly shook Lula's hand to seal the deal. She passionately dreamed of returning home as soon as possible and reclaiming what was unjustly taken from her. Viola, not to waste time, wanted to leave immediately, and Luluo, surprised by her impatience, asked if she really wanted to go right now. The group found themselves before an endless field stretching right by the massive walls of the city Nemesis, and Viola, gazing at that sturdy structure, asked Lulua if this was really the place from which they could sneak inside. Viola looked at the wall and felt. It was as if impregnable, reinforced by several magical layers, so she stared at every stone, searching for even the smallest crack. Lulua explained that there is one special point. It is very fragile by itself. He activated a special device, released magical energy, and for a moment cut a crack in the city's defense. A shining rift opened in the solid stone wall, like secret gates, and Noah and Viola froze in amazement. Through it, the streets of Nemes appeared. When they stepped over the threshold, Lulua said that if the previous king were alive, such a flaw would have been noticed long ago. Viola fell silent for a moment at the mention of her late father. Lulua warned them to be very careful as they entered. Nemes was no longer ordinary. Viola thanked him, and before he left forever, promised not to forget their agreement. Viola touched the crack that began to close behind her, and with a bitter smile noticed the irony. Finally returning to her beloved homeland, but in the role of a secret agent. Viola stepped onto the cobbled streets of Nemesis, and behind her walked Noah. They walked cautiously, sharply sensing the strange atmosphere of the capital. The streets of the capital, once bustling with life, now stood eerily quiet and empty, and Noah and Viola anxiously felt the absence of people. Suddenly, King Roy and Cecilia appeared before them. Everyone froze in surprise. Viola looked stunned at the traitor who appeared before her again, and Roy could not hide his astonishment at her lightning-fast return. Viola recognized the man. It was the king of Nemes, and the woman beside him the high saint. Cecilia glanced around with a mysterious smile, and an unfathomable malice blazed in her eyes. Viola felt a stunning threat radiating from the woman known as the high saint. Cecilia, with a mocking sneer, clearly took sick pleasure in the princess's misfortune. Cecilia revealed her true demonic face, large horns, an icy deadly aura, and laughing, addressed Viola. "Haven't your feelings dulled since you became a child?